Hi, I'm Josh Hubbard, Managing Director of Elevate Management Consulting. Today we're sitting down with Marc Stigter to talk about the concept of strategy, culture, and leadership. Marc thinks about these concepts differently, with taking a 180-degree perspective with his experience as a practitioner, a researcher, and an advisor.
So, Mark, let's start with leadership. How do you define leadership?
Well, that is a funny one because, and I'm being facetious here, Olivia, because no matter how I answer this, I probably will be okay. You type in leadership in Amazon, you get like 60, 70,000 books with the word leadership in the title. There are 2,500 academic definitions. There are dozens and dozens of leadership philosophies, like appreciative leadership, servant leadership, transactional leadership, you name it, we've covered it. So no matter how I answer this, it will be okay. Okay, and I'm not diminishing any of those qualities that are always kind of mentioned, and we should demonstrate those. But I think there's an opportunity for leadership teams to bring it to the core, this concept, in terms what it really means, at least from my perspective. And if you look at the word leader in Anglo-Saxon, later, what it means is road or path. So the second, in that context, the second we call ourselves leaders, we should be consumed with this question indeed: what is my preferred road or path for my team or department or organization? What is the desired state looks like? What does success look like in the future, or what is our vision? I don't care what you call it, but we're talking about that top right quadrant. And so often here lies a huge opportunity for leadership teams, I think, and to lift leadership teams, and not just trying to deal with the day-to-day operations. I think that is just trying to make 1 + 1 = 2, but redirect energies for the other balls that they can be playing with in terms of strategy and culture as well. So again, those concepts are completely intertwined. That's why I think it's very difficult to look them each one of them in silo, and that's why I work with leadership teams on approaching all three.
Marc, you seem to have a multidisciplinary approach combining culture, strategy, and leadership. Why is it that you look at those things together?
Well, they're intertwined, and where I come from, I've always been seen an opportunity for leadership teams, leaders, and their teams to try to make 1 + 1 = 3. Really try to optimize and maximize value and care enduringly into the future. And one way of doing that is indeed for leaders to look at their operations and see whether they can not necessarily do more, but better, and optimize that. And they seem to be spending a lot of time dealing with the day-to-day operational challenges. But I think leaders, there lies the opportunity. They have a few other balls in the air to play with as well, in order to maximize value into the future. And that is indeed strategy. So it's their ability then to perhaps create and realize a distinctive strategy, in order to create value and care. And the other one, of course, is culture. We all want kind of healthy, inclusive, and high performance culture to help realize that aspirational, inspirational strategy. And we all know, your audiences know that culture is indeed, the famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I would add for lunch and dinner too, indeed. Those two are completely intertwined. Again, if you want an aspirational, inspirational vision and strategy, if you want to realize that, most likely it always relates to change, right? Strategy. So most likely you would have to change certain aspects, or grow or further develop certain aspects of your culture for that to be enabled.
Marc, that brings us to strategy. It's widely understood that the majority of strategies fail. If this is the case, then why do we even bother with the concept in the first place?
Yeah, I'm being facetious again. I sometimes think that myself too, right? And I totally understand from leaders' kind of perspective that there's so many uncontrollable variables at play and uncertainty, and things move so quickly, right? What's the point if 8 out of 10 strategies fail? Why even bother? So it seems like a silly question, but perhaps it isn't. But of course, I think there's what we perhaps want to realize, bringing it back to the core, like we did with the leadership question as well. Strategy, this concept has been around, I think, for 3,000 years. It was the old Greek. They tried to define it as strategem, which means generalship, which in turns means, coming up with a plan, mobilizing the troops and terminating the enemy. So this concept was linked to survival, to warfare. So in a corporate setting, you could argue, yes, it is still linked to survival or at least longevity. And if it's not linked to survival or longevity for some organizations, then surely it's about this question as a leadership team, how do we really truly optimize and maximize value and care enduringly into the future? And that is the ultimate strategic question and leadership question. So that is incredibly exciting, I think. And that's why it is important still today and perhaps more than ever.
So, Marc, why do you feel that so many strategies fail?
Well, this is well recorded and I think well known. And first and foremost, it will have to do with leadership team ultimately, because leaders should be the ultimate kind of orchestrators and mobilizers and coordinators of creating and realizing a distinctive strategy. And like I said before, nowadays it seems so many leaders are so consumed with the day-to-day operational challenges that they contract and retract back to that, and therefore don't spend enough time with their teams on strategy and as a continuous practice, And so what we then do is we end up once or twice a year having a strategy session, a strategic planning session. And strategy doesn't work that way. It's not that we can lock ourselves up for 1 or 2 days, once or twice a year, and then like a switch here that we can turn on and off, and suddenly we're all going to be strategic. So unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It is a continuous practice. And also I found if you want to have a distinctive strategy as an output, then that relies on the quality of the input in terms of the quality of your insights and data and information. And that requires the ability and the time of leaders to do some sensing in terms of external sensing and internal sensing. And often I find we don't spend enough time doing that as well. And then, of course, the normal kind of reasons why strategy fail is because once we have created a strategy, we have difficulties socializing it across the organization. We have difficulties contextualizing it and making it meaningful across all levels, so that people at all levels know how they can contribute to the organizational strategy. And then also how to keep it alive and keep the momentum and review the progress and track the accountabilities and build in the regular touch points where we're not only doing that, but then also refresh the strategy as we go on and turning it into a continuous practice, as I said before.
So, Marc, you've explained the concept of 1 + 1 = 2 and also 1 + 1 = 3. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Well, it shows that my maths are not my strongest. It's not my strongest point. No, what I'm trying to say, and I do this in the context of your audiences being leaders, be it at team or departmental or organizational. In that context, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for many leaders, not just to be dealing with the day-to-day operational challenges, and I see that perhaps as a more of a management function, and nothing wrong with that, but trying to make critically, of course, trying to make 1 + 1 = 2. But there is an opportunity to redirect energies and focus and time to also create incremental value and care enduringly into the future by coming up and creating and realizing kind of distinctive strategies and spending time on that being enabled by healthy, inclusive, and high-performance culture. And that is the distinction in my view.
Marc, just interested to hear about why you're so critical about strategic planning within organisations and, many of the issues and that are encountered as part of strategic planning.
Well, Actually, I forgot to mention that may well be another reason why so many strategies fail, because we look at strategy as strategic planning. And my problem with that, and I'm being facetious, obviously, is that a plan on itself, basically a whole to-do list with 50 or 80 kind of strategic actions, doesn't mobilize or motivate anybody. Huh? We're not called human doings for a reason. We are called human beings. So what motivates and mobilizes human beings is a compelling story. It's a compelling narrative. So I think there's an opportunity for leaders, again, at team level or departmental level or organizational level, not just to come up with a plan, but co-create their compelling stories. And if you want, perhaps I'll share a few little tips how your audiences potentially could do that. Would that
Please
be
do.
helpful?
Please do.
So for me, it's when you've got your team together, is being able to answer 5 very simple questions. And it is simple. They're not always easy, but and each of your team members can probably already articulate those questions straight away. But what we want to achieve is a shared, unified, collective articulation within your team or department or organization. Now, those 5 kind of simple questions are, before we look at what our vision is or desired state is actually asking ourselves where we've come from. So question number 1 is, where have we come from? And then there are 2 little questions that I suggest you discuss with your team. And number 1 is actually, what have we done well in the last 12 months or 18 months or 2 years, And that is an important question, because when people answer what they have done well, you will notice that it is not an insignificant list. People have put a lot of time and energy to get us where we are today. So that is a point of acknowledgement and recognition. And we don't always stand still and reflect on that. It's always, okay, done and move on, to the next kind of task. But that is important also because it's a positive start or articulation of your compelling story, and some of your stakeholders need reminding from time to time. So that is, I think, critically important. And then, of course, in hindsight, you would want to ask, what could we have done a little bit better? And align the team around that first question. It gives you context. Now, the second question is, okay, where do we find ourselves today? So it would be nice if you had some information around the markets and the industry and the trends, of course, Pastel, perhaps, framework. And then internally as well, of course, the state of your strategy, your culture, your behaviors, the performances perhaps of several kind of functions. But critically important is a shared understanding of, people may not agree with this, they may find it too negative, but what your burning platform is. So is your team able to articulate in a shared fashion what the key risks or challenges or weaknesses are? And I think that is important, because if they tend to be quite big, then that we can use that as a point of ignition, as an impetus to start attacking business as usual, and not holding on to the status quo. And perhaps realize that holding on to the status quo often is your biggest risk. So that is an important aspect. And I think the other aspect in terms of where we find ourselves today, it's, perhaps a corny one, but that's back to purpose. And not because most organizations do something incredibly meaningful, but we capture that in a cognitive kind of statement that perhaps cognitively makes sense, but not emotively. So I often find there is an opportunity for teams and departments and organizations to capture that much more emotively, Now, the third question then becomes, indeed, what does success look like, or what is our desired state? Or what is our vision? And the trick is that is important for your team to visualize. But if we cannot visualize this together, then how can we make it happen, right? And also visualize that in a way, not in terms of just making 1 + 1 = 2, but in, as we said before, in terms of the 1 + 1 = 3. So yeah, that is critically important. And then question number 4, here comes then the plan, or perhaps a scorecard, where we, how are we going to get there? What are the key priorities from a variety of perspective? And linking those strategic priorities to measurements, timings, and accountabilities and actions. So that is critically important. That's something very tangible that you then walk away with. And then question number 5 at this stage, perhaps not necessarily about culture, but just some questions around behaviors, you know? So what are some of the behaviors perhaps within the team that we should stop, start, and continue? So I find those 5 steps and going through that with your team, whether you are a team or a departmental level, organizational level, I think that could be critically beneficial, and that is your compelling story.
Thanks, Mark. That was a great explanation. So you mentioned as part of your strategic planning response that, you know, a lot of organisations, when they talk to their vision or their reason for being, it can be quite a high-level cognitive statement that you understand in your mind, but it doesn't mean much. Could you just elaborate a little bit further on that, please?
Yeah. And perhaps I'll overdo it in the answer, Josh, that I give you just to make a point, not to try to be clever here, but years and years ago, many of my clients, not many, but several of my clients in Western Australia, let's say mining companies, I would ask them what their purpose was, and this is not the case anymore, but this is years and years ago, and they would turn back to me and said, "Well, Mark, we dig shit out of the ground to maximize shareholder value, you know?" And well, I cognitively can understand that, but clearly it's not emotive, is it?
No.
You know, and also they create much more value than just shareholder value. You know, there's something much more meaningful that they should be capturing within their reason for being, because that's critically important for your own people and other stakeholders, that there's true meaning to what you're doing, so that people can understand that and go into fifth gear and give that discretionary effort day in, day out as well. And that's not captured in the example that I gave you.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Quite often you hear this concept of a leader versus a manager. What's your articulation of that? And in your mind, what is the difference? And in what mode are most people operating?
Well, we're back to one of the earlier points, Josh, that bringing the concept of leadership back to what it actually means, you know, and like I said, leader in Anglo-Saxon leader means road or path. So the second we call ourselves leaders and we're part of an executive leadership team, we are consumed, or we should be consumed with this question: what is my preferred road or path or desired state for my team, department, or organization? Now, you know, I noticed that many so-called leadership teams are actually, like I said before, spending 110% of their time dealing with the day-to-day operational challenges. You know, so they are, from my perspective, perhaps, and I'm not finger pointing, there lies the opportunity. They are not leadership teams, they are glorified management teams, you know? And again, nothing wrong with being a manager, but there is the distinction. The second you call yourself a leadership team, you are consumed with this difficult question indeed: how can we make 1 + 1 = 3 enduringly into the future? You know, so that means redirecting a lot of time, not only dealing with the day-to-day operational challenges, but working on your strategic transformation and your cultural transformation in order to really, truly maximize value and care enduringly into the future. Now, that I think is incredibly exciting, but that is difficult. That is difficult, but there lies the opportunity. And if leaders can, you know, co-create those compelling stories the way we kind of talked about, then that would be a good step, I think.
We've spoken, Mark, that one of the challenges that a lot of leaders are spending too much time in operations and aren't spending the time on strategy. Do you have any tips, I guess, around how they can sort of look to spend more time in the strategic space? And, you know, obviously part of the challenge is that it becomes a bit self-fulfilling. If you don't do strategy, you spend more time in operations.
Yeah, that's the trap, isn't it? That we keep on running behind ourselves. And I totally understand. And there's so many uncontrollable variables nowadays at play, and coming your way as a leader. Again, whether you're heading up a team or a department or an organization, the principles are the same, but the complexity, of course, increases. So I feel for leaders, but I think it ultimately has to do. I don't think you've got a choice. Like I said before, just trying to keep your head above the water and dealing with the day-to-day operational challenges and protecting business as usual and the status quo, as a matter of fact, is your biggest risk. So you have to redirect time and energy to work on strategy, because many of the strategic kind of actions that you will come up with will kind of ease up your operational pressures, of course, especially when it comes often to processes and systems or disenabling factors within your organization, like not fit for purpose processes, systems, or not the right people in the right jobs at the right time with the right ability and attitude. You need to look at those areas to ease up your operations, your day-to-day operational challenges, of course. So yeah, it's a discipline and it's priority setting that this is crucially important for leaders and their teams to, I would say, at least spend 30-40% of their time on, and turn that, as we said before, into strategizing and culturing.
So, Mark, the next question we'd like to ask is, why is improving organisational culture so difficult?
Well, I think we all, when it comes to culture, we know what we want. We all want kind of a healthy culture, an inclusive culture, high-performing culture, and so that is clear. The question is, how do you get there, and how do you keep that? And culture is a little bit of a beast, and I feel, at least from my perspective, that we've been struggling with this concept for more than half a century. When a consultant, I think it was a Boston consultant person, defined it as the way we do things around here. So you recognize that definition, and the problem with that is that indeed it's then already an output, isn't it? So how do you change an output? And I don't think there are easy ways of enduringly changing a cultural output, you know? So what organizations then tend to do is then they say, oh, ooh, we need to look at our values. And they have then a value session, and then they come up with values like integrity and respect and accountability. And there are like 8 values like that, generic values like that 80% of all organizations have. So that those espoused values in itself don't change behaviors. So it's the linkage to behaviors. And so culture, I think academically, they define it as the behaviors of a group of people, the values of a group of people that are demonstrated through behaviors that have become the norm. So how do you change that? And for me, there are no shortcuts, because every time when we try to do a cultural change, we change systems or processes, or we do a restructure, or we come up with a new strategy, what you will find, I don't know if that's your experience as well, is that initially the first 3, 6, 9 months, you will think, oh, yeah, this is going in the right way. But then inexorably, after some time, the norms and the behaviors retract back to the original kind of culture that you had. So it is a little bit of a beast. And if you want to change it enduringly, and it's not changing and throwing the baby out with the bathwater, you have some jewels within your culture that you want to bring forward, right? So you want to know what those are, but then undoubtedly there are certain aspects of your culture that you can grow and develop further or change in order to create and realize your strategy. So then I think you need to go a little bit deeper into the being of your organization. And this is an area that Sir Cary Cooper from Manchester Business School and myself are looking into and are writing a book about, indeed. So I think a very, very important question.
Mark, you've turned strategy and culture into verbs when describing these things. Why?
Oh, like I said before, if you really want some strategic and cultural transformation, as I said before, It's not about locking yourself up once or twice a year and looking at those concepts. So to me, they are continuous practices. You know, they're iterative practices that over time you kind of create and improve upon. And so yeah, unfortunately, I think that's a big opportunity for leadership teams to look at it as. Sorry, I'm waffling here a little bit because I think it's a really good question. It is about turning those concepts into living experiences and continuously, at least monthly, addressing, you know, your strategy and your culture. And that takes some time, but it's time well spent, I think.
Lastly, Marc, what is the most important leadership quality to you and why?
Very philosophical question, indeed. And it prompts me thinking of Aristotle. And I agree, well, who am I to agree with Aristotle, right? But he argued that of all the qualities, courage is the most important one, because he said that all the other qualities ultimately depend on courage. And so I think, yeah, for me personally, courage, and perhaps for many other leaders too, courage is one of the most important qualities. And that's not just the courage to think big, you know, and think differently as where we can take our team or department or organization, because that can be daunting, huh? But also the courage to look at our own shortcomings when it comes to our own being or our own ability or knowledge or desire. So that's why for me, courage is a fantastic kind of quality for most leaders to have. And you only ask for one, but in one breath, I would add empathy as a critical kind of leadership quality too.
It was great to have the opportunity to sit down with Marc today to discuss the concepts of strategy, culture, and leadership. You'll be hearing more from us in this series into the future. In the meantime, if you'd like to hear a bit about what we do at Elevate Management Consulting, feel free to visit our website, elevatemc.com.au.